So it's my great pleasure to thank a large number of people without whom this wouldn't have been possible. In fact, for an Indian student, a Chinese student and an American student in Oxford to organize, with the great help of others, this event on an Indian university campus is quite a unique undertaking. So I want to thank all those who have helped it happen. Professor Anuradha Chenoy, thank you so much for allowing it to happen in SIS. And then there is the Dean of the School of Arts and Aesthetics, Professor Ira Bhaskar, who has provided the auditorium for the films this afternoon. There's Professor Dolla, who is unfortunately indisposed, but who has helped enormously behind the scenes, and Professor Komandapalli, who has been indispensable for this event, and Professor Varun Sani also for ongoing support in the background. Then there is a volunteer team in New Delhi. I have a list of names to whom we are all very, very grateful. Setan Dolkar, Lee K, Anmol Mukhia, and Aparna Vishisht. And then the funders. There are two funding agencies in Oxford which have enabled this slightly longer shoestring to support the initiative in India, and the SIS and the SIA, who in providing facilities have actually subsidized this event. But most of all, the organizing team, Yuga, Danielle, Adya Shukla, is she here? No, she's coming. And Zhang Yang. So I want to say a huge thank you to everybody. And last but not least, the keynote speakers, Professor Dhruv Raina and Subimal Bhattacharya. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have no qualifications to make this keynote address. I'm a microeconomist, a field economist, a political economist of Mofussil, India. But as a public interest undertaking, I agreed to co-organize a British Academy project comparing China and India's economic and social pathways, largely in memory of my late husband, Gordon White, who was a scholar of the politics of China. So it was in his memory that I agreed to do something which at the start was purely organizational. Then the British Academy asked Delia Davin, the sociologist of China, and me to edit a book. And it was that process of editing and the reflections that have been forced on me through editing that book which have provided the nutrient base for this, this keynote address. Okay, so my title of Comparisons Are Odious, that the comparison between India and China is odious. When I was a child and felt a bit odd, my mother always used to say, don't compare yourself with others, comparisons are odious. So I looked it up, and it first came from an essay by John Lydgate in 1440, writing on a debate between the horse, the goose, and the sheep. And the comparison was on their military value to man. And John Lydgate wrote, odious of old have been comparisons, and of comparisons engendered is hatred. So it's a very powerful thing to compare anything, China and India in particular. So the act of likening and comparing is also an act of competition. The loser hates the winner. The audience is unsure of the criteria of comparison, which are always incomplete, that lie behind the judgment, and they may hate the judgment. And there's a further implication from comparing, that there are implications of the lessons of the winner for the loser in the comparison, or for others. The comparison between China and India in particular, and not China and America, is not really a topic for J.S. Mill's method of difference, because the two are so complicated. But China and India have been twinned in the Western imagination, and I think also in the Indian imagination. They've been twinned through media and diplomacy, and they've been twinned in a lot of writing in social science. I'm thinking of Deepak Nair's Catch Up, where India's catching up with China, and Pranab Bardhan's Asian giants with feet of clay. And these countries are also often used as a foil to what Jared Diamond called the weird countries, the Western industrialized, educated, rich and democratic countries. China and India may have elements of that set, but not the whole set, and they're used as a kind of counterfoil. So the easiest way in which China and India are compared, certainly in social sciences, is competitively. And there are a number of ways in which they are compared competitively. The most common way assumes similar ends and similar means, and therefore assesses lags. And I can tell you, it's always India, apart from some aspects of telecommunications. It's India that lags China. There are also approaches to comparison which accept common ends but allow for different pathways, different means. And then in economics in particular, China and India are often compared with a lot of other countries against a common model or a common hypothesis or a common set of data. And then you find that China and India are compared against a common trend. That's the method of regression analysis, in terms of their deviation from a common trend, which may actually have no dots on the line at all. And more rarely, evidence from India and China is used to compare, not to compare, but to build higher order generalizations. But again, in social science and particularly in economics, which is where I come from, the evidence is built up from China, India, and other countries. At least that doesn't exceptionalize China, and it doesn't exceptionalize India. And the kind of example that of this approach is highlighted in this slide. I think at the top we have GDP, a big gap between China and India. Here we have electricity generation, also a large gap. And we have constant comparisons between the dragon and India's elephant or India's tiger. Here we have growth rates which converged but have now disappeared again. That is, in fact, an African elephant. It's a particularly long-eared elephant, which adorns the front of a book comparing India and China. But you get the meaning. Yeah? India is constantly lagging in these comparisons. And I noticed that just 3 days ago, in the Hindustan Times, which is pushed under our door every morning in Aravali guest house, there was an op-ed by Chanakya on President Xi's visit to India. And well, there's quite a lot of quotes, but well, I can't read it because it's too dark. But the quote I've put onto the slide: does anybody compare the United States to Mexico? Beijing sees only Washington as its peer. What it would like to be compared to is the US, not to India. India hardly makes it to the third tier of nations in China's ranking. So there's a problem. Yeah, why do we bother if wherever we look in terms of economic indicators, at any rate, India is lagging? Okay, so that's the message which is coming out of the attempts to compare China and India competitively. But there are other ways of comparing China and India that are infinitely more interesting. They depend on the prior assumption, which is not one accepted in all social science, that time is unique, space is unique, and society is unique, so that converting them into coefficients and winding them backwards and forwards in regression analysis is indefensible. India is unique, and so is China. And this was the case of the debate between the horse, the goose, and the sheep. The horse argued that in terms of its usefulness to man, it was superior in speed and endurance and in strength. Yes, sock it to you, folks, I win. The goose said, oh no, I win because I'm inherently comfortable in air, on water, and on the land. And not only am I comfortable in the air and the water, which the horse certainly wouldn't be, but I'm quite useful in terms of feathers for arrows. Remember, this is 1440, and down for warmth. And with respect to the sheep, the ram answered for the sheep because the sheep was too meek to speak for herself. And the ram said that the sheep was the Lamb of God, and that the sheep was the means of salvation for the soldiers who were killed in war. And beside that, there was wool, there was meat, there was tallow, there were other useful things. So you get my drift, that the justification of the horse, the goose, and the sheep in terms of their military value to man were in dimensions which were completely non-comparable. So both ends and means are different. And the challenge then is, can we compare the structure of the difference? And what is the structure that we're going to compare the structure of the difference for? And an additional question, which I put at the bottom of this slide, is it appropriate to compare economic or social outcomes once one's identified a common structure that's able to be compared without including politics? And I'm afraid an awful lot of social science does try to do all this without including politics. Anyway, here are some examples of China and India not being just lagged, but being structurally different. It's a difficult table. There are actually 3 sets of variables, only one of which is highlighted. But look at foreign direct investment, in and out. There's absolutely no comparison. The structure of foreign direct investment, the relationship between China and external investment is quite different. Chinese exports are 10 times those of India. India's informal economy is at least twice as big as India and is 2/3 of the whole economy. Informal jobs, unregistered jobs, 9 out of 10 in India are unregistered. We're in a room where everybody probably has registered jobs, but that's not the case with most jobs in India. In China, it used to be 0. It's now growing, and it might be as much as half the livelihoods of China being